Welcome to the Gifts for Glory podcast, where we celebrate and promote men and women using their gifts for God's glory. Know someone who is making an impact for God's kingdom using their gifts, talents, and passions? We'd love to meet them. Send us an email at podcast@giftsforglory.com. That's podcast@gifts4glory.com. And now here is our host, Dave Ebert.
Good evening, friends and neighbors, and welcome to the latest edition of the Gift for Glory podcast. Really excited to have you along, whether you're watching live on social media or you're watching the replay on the Creative Motion Network, or if you're listening to the podcast on Taken TV Network or all major podcast platforms. We just thank you for joining us each and every week. And, you know, if you like what we're doing, we would love to have some feedback from you. Also, if you would consider being a Patreon supporter, we're so thankful to Simply Felicity Media and Black Conservative Female Felicity Joy. You can see her links in the scroll at the bottom. We just really appreciate her support of our podcast. And if you'd like to support the Gifts for Glory podcast, please go to patreon.com/giftsforglory. And we would just really be blessed by it. And we're really blessed every time that you watch, you like, you share, because this podcast is all about just sharing the gifts that God has given us and using them for God's glory. So what I want to do right now is just dive into our Devotions with Dave segment. Our Devotions with Dave segment coming tonight from Ephesians chapter 6, verses 13 to 18. A very popular passage, but I really wanted to just dive into this one more time tonight, because there is so much angst in the world, and we as Christians have to be ready to fight, not flesh and blood, not our neighbors, not our friends on Facebook, not people in Facebook groups, but fight the real enemy. So in Ephesians 6, 13 to 18, therefore put on every piece of God's armor so you will be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. Then after the battle, you will still be standing firm. Stand your ground, putting on the belt of truth and the body armor of God's righteousness. For shoes, put on the peace that comes from the good news so that you'll be fully prepared. In addition to all these, hold up the shield of faith to stop the fiery arrows of the devil. Put on salvation as your helmet and take the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Pray in the Spirit at all times and on every occasion. Stay alert and be persistent in your prayers for all believers everywhere. So just a reminder that we're fighting not against, in other portions of the Bible it talks about we're not fighting against enemies, flesh and blood. We're fighting against the devil and his minions and his demons and everything else that he puts at his disposal. We're fighting against that. And we need to keep that focus, and we need to be prepared. Most importantly, the helmet of salvation to protect our head, our mind, our eyes, the sword of the Spirit, which is not only a defensive mechanism, but is also an offensive mechanism. And then the same for the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. So you want to take the Word of God as your weapon, because that's how Jesus defeated the devil in the wilderness. Is he used the Word of God. He didn't use crafty ideas. He used the word, and that is our best weapon against the attacks and the schemes of the enemy. So I just want to encourage you to put on the full armor of God in these days where it's so hard to stand firm. God gives us the weaponry and gives us the protection we need so that we can stand firm. So I want to use that as an encouragement to you as we read that from Ephesians 6, verses 13 to 18 here on our Devotions with Dave segment. So thank you for hanging on through that. Now, our guest at this time, his name is Mike Domeny. He's a speaker, he's an actor, and author. He lives in New Hampshire with his wife, Kelsey, and daughter, Addie. He is also an enthusiastic tea drinker, a bocce ball tosser, ramen soup experimenter, which we'll definitely dive into that. He's a river rock climber, word rhymer, and cereal without milk eater. He's a member of 321 Improv, which he joined in 2011. He's traveled the country sharing the joy that can be found in Jesus in this unscripted life, and he has a passion for teaching Christ followers to grow closer through Jesus through the unexpected, which is the topic of his book. I'll pop that up on the screen right now, Thrown Off Script, is his book. So want to show you a trailer for the book that was released last summer, and then we'll bring in our guest in just a moment.
When we make plans, we write a script for our lives. But then we're interrupted. The unexpected strikes, and before we know it, our plans are scrapped. We're thrown off our script, and we're left wondering, what do I do now? Does God even care? I'm Mike Domeny, and after nearly a decade of professional improv, I know what it's like to be off script. And I found that the tools that make improv work on stage can help us all thrive in the unexpected in life and turn interruptions into opportunities. And it's all in my new book, Thrown Off Script. In it, we'll laugh, we'll chat, we'll be challenged as you'll learn how to become a master improviser for the next time you are thrown off script.
So that is the trailer for the book, and now here is the author of the book, Mike Domeny. Mike, welcome to the Gifts for Glory podcast.
Hey man, so good to be here. Thanks so much for the invite, and I'm excited to chat with you a little bit, and it's been great to chat with you a little bit before we went live too, to hear the awesome stuff you're doing, man. It's so good to be here.
I'm glad to have you, and it's awesome to meet a fellow Christian who's also an improviser, because
it's a rare breed, man. There's not many.
We are rare. What was interesting is I moved to Chicago in 2013, and I thought that I was going to corner the market. I was like, I've never heard of Christian improv. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it in Chicago. And then
Chicago's like the mecca, the motherland of improv. That's a tough spot. That's awesome.
And that's where I found you. I found Panic Squad and Fish Sticks, and what was formerly known as Improv. Who is now part of Fish Sticks national brand. So it's really awesome to see so many brothers and sisters who have found improv as a way to bring light to the world, to minister to others, and also and believe it or not, Christians can do this, have fun.
What? It's crazy. Craziness. Can't believe we said that.
Yeah. For improv, and this is something that when I teach improv or I talk about it when I'm being on other people's podcasts, is that there are three fundamentals to being a good Christian and being a good improviser. That is love, support, and work in humility. And what would you say? Does that sound pretty good to you?
Love it. Yeah, man. I think that's spot on. I think there's a lot of parallels to being on stage and performing well on stage and performing in the stage of life, right? I mean, that's what the whole book's about. And there's so much parallel there that really what makes improv work and what makes you a good teammate in an improv team makes you a great friend. It makes you a great husband. It makes you a great follower of Christ, because your ability to improv's not all about rolling with the punches. It's certainly not about saying the right thing. It's more about this mindset of like, all right, I'm going to accept what's offered to me. I'm going to add value, and I'm going to keep an open mind, right? And if you have those three things, it's that humility. Then you're in a good position to be able to really blossom in these relationships that we were given here.
So you've been doing improv for over 10 years, because you said that in the trailer talking about the book that at that point you had been in improv for 10 years. So yeah. Was 321 your first improv group, or had you joined them after being in improv for a while?
No, honestly, that was my first time really doing improv, apart from maybe a couple, lessons in an acting class here and there where let's do improv for a little bit, here and there. But it was scary. Honestly, I don't even know why I got offered the role with 321, because on paper and my credentials did not really lend themselves to that. But, God was ready to throw me in the deep end. So that's what we did.
So how did you guys connect? Because was there a time where the three of you guys lived closer? Because I know right now you guys are pretty spread out.
Yeah, no. So the group was founded by Carl Crispin, even before that. And he had been doing improv for a while with another group, CPR Improv, back in the day. And so when he started 3-2-1 Improv with a couple other guys. Those guys left, and then it was time to fill these 2 slots, and so he reached out to a couple people in his network. Hey, who can you recommend? Which, I mean, like we've mentioned, it's such a specific type of person. Who do you know who can do improv at the professional level and is a Christian and doesn't mind traveling, year round, full time, and it's a very specific type of person. So I got recommended by someone in my theater department, that knew me, and so I didn't even know about the group. I hadn't heard about it. Seemed like a scam, I was like, is this for real? It sat in my inbox for a while because, like I said, I'd never done improv before. I was like, I mean, that'd be fun. I like acting, but improv, I've never been one of those improv types.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been the one. It's like, I'll just wing it. I did scripted theater. I love scripted. I love memorizing. I love things going according to plans. I never, procrastinated on the projects. I always like to, have everything all scripted out and everything. And so it was like, that'd be fun, but probably not for me. But it got to a point where I could not. It was after college. I got married right out of college and couldn't find a job. Right. Like, I thought, oh, maybe I'll be like a youth pastor or something. No, that didn't work. And I applied to be like to work at a jewelry store. And I don't know anything about jewelry. I went in for the interview and like there was a quiz about diamonds. I'm like, I have no idea. I'm sorry, this is not for me. I'll just see myself out. And actually did get a job with traveling with my wife for something else, which was phenomenal, great experience. And it was at the end of that year that then I was like, all right, we're wrapping up. Let me, write back to Carl and see where he's at. And he said, great, let's do it. Let's and so he offered the job.
Wow.
And then we had just packed up the job that we had been doing previously, and then like right the day we quit or stopped that job, Carl called me back and said, hey man, this is super embarrassing. I hate to be doing this, but I gotta let you know the 2 guys who were here before you, they said they were going to leave, but they changed their minds. They're going to stay on for another year or more. So I have to retract that job offer. So it's right off the bat, was kind of putting me on this journey of like, look, you got to be ready to go with the flow. Like, hey, things don't always work out. You're going to get thrown off a little bit. And so I didn't know why. It was kind of crazy, but one more year of the job that my wife and I had done, and it was great. We grew closer together as a couple, and we had such great experiences traveling and doing a little bit of speaking, and that was great. And then after that, sure enough, it was time to join the team, and God's timing was good, and so that was that. So yeah, we didn't know each other before doing the group, and we've never lived close to each other since then. It's just we fly in, we do a show, fly back out to the next one, or fly home or whatever. So that's been the past decade or so, and it's been a blast.
How does that work though? For my team, that in my experience, that there's a lot of uneasiness about not having the rehearsal time together to be able to have that gel. How does that dynamic work?
Yeah, you know what? We say each show is rehearsal for the next one. Like, so and so yeah, we honestly don't really rehearse or get together, in between shows. It's really when Jeremy joined, he's the other guy on the team, and when he joined about a year and a half after I did, we had a show in Florida, say on Saturday. We flew in on Friday, a day early, and we said, all right, here's the games we play, here's how to play them, let's give them each a little run through here. And he just, all right, do the best you can. And all right, sounds good. And we showed up to the show the next day in front of a live paying audience. So it was a kind of high pressure, just throw you in the deep end, but it's good. And Jeremy obviously rose to the occasion, and he's been great ever since. So yeah, not a whole lot of rehearsal in between. Just a matter of, we know the games. I know it's we will have a different audience every night, traveling around, and so it would be different if you have a recurring gig, and you've got people coming back and they love to see you and they love that they've got that relationship with you, and you want to offer different games, different experiences, and that has its own benefits, and it has its own challenges as well. And so we found like, well, you know what, we stick with the games that we know, and the roles that we have in them, and we just try to deliver that every night. So it's a different kind of dynamic, but that's how we operate.
Has there ever been a moment where you guys have gone up on stage and you're like, and you just froze, or have you guys just had chemistry the entire time? Right?
Yeah, I don't think it was a matter of freezing, not really knowing what. I think, I mean, the chemistry is super important, right? And and I'm thinking back to like the first shows we did. I think it probably wasn't a matter of freezing, but it was a matter of the games kind of wrapped up a lot sooner than they do now, because you kind of run out of things to do and places to go with it. And so a game that we might play for even 8 minutes now, we at the beginning maybe only took like 3 minutes, like, all right, move to the next one. And so, yeah, I think if you just decide to not freeze, if you just decide, all right, we're going to keep it going no matter what, then you don't end up with that moment of like, I don't know what to do. But you roll with it as if, yep, that's exactly what we're planning the whole time, even though it may not have been.
And I think that's the beauty of improv, is that an audience that knows that it's improv, there's grace there for those moments where it's like, they know you're creating on the spot, so they're willing to give you that extra moment. Whereas in a scripted play or performance, they're like, he just blew that line.
Oh yeah, 100%. Man, I'll tell you what, like, we talked to some stand-up comedians. They're like, oh man, I don't know how you guys do what you do. Like, just go up there with no script, no material. And I'm like, dude, I don't know how you do what you do. Like, I'm impressed. Like, there's, like you said, so much more grace for an improviser, because if you say something as in improv that's kind of funny, like, oh, that, then the audience is like, hey, that's pretty funny, that's pretty good. And if you say something really funny, it's like, whoa, blow their minds, like, hey, they just came up with that on the spot. But in a like a stand-up routine, if you say something kind of funny, it's like, you've been scripting and crafting and working on that, and that's the best you could come up with. So it's like there's such a higher bar for the scripted, the written stuff like that in stand up. And so, yeah, I feel like it's cheating sometimes to do improv and be like, hey, if I just say something, then I'm already rising to the standard, right? Beating the expectations of the audience. So I feel like it's cheating a little bit, but I appreciate the grace there to like, all right, the audience is here, they're ready to just enjoy and like let us go.
As a Christian improviser, how do you guarantee that you don't get in a role and create to the point that you cross a line or maybe mishandle the Bible or something? What protections does 3-2-1 and you personally have to protect the improv?
That's a great question. I love that. Well, I'll say, first of all, for 3-2-1 improv, we our content is clean, family friendly, of course, but it's not biblical. It's not that we don't really reference any of the Bible or Jesus in the content of the show. So we just avoid mishandling scripture or disrespecting Jesus even accidentally. We just avoid that by, we'll keep it. The stuff is silly. The stuff is weird. The stuff is nonsensical. Stuff is make-believe, whatever. But it's not, so none of it is ever like, about Moses and a scene, at the Red Sea or anything like that, just in case, you don't want to offend someone who is, thinks that you mishandle someone that they revere.
Right.
I think Christians, honestly, we could probably ease up a little bit and understand that the people in the Bible are flawed and they are comically wrong sometimes and comically make comically bad decisions. But that we've just decided we're not going to, go there at all with the show. So we keep things fun, light, silly, weird, but not biblically based necessarily. And then personally and as a group, as far as like the content, like how do you, keep your standard of clean? It's tough, right? Because what you might consider family friendly and clean is not necessarily what someone else might. And so I there was a time a number of years ago I performed with a local group, and that was billed as clean and family friendly, but the standard was not as high or as strict as I personally would do. And that was a little bit of a struggle, right? Like I was like, I'll keep my standard, but sometimes you're involved in a scene or with some suggestions from the audience that like, ah, man, I wouldn't want to go there, and that was a little bit of a struggle. I eventually ended up not performing with the group. Just is like, I'm just gonna avoid that. And so it's tough to like, where's your line and where's that, for other people and for the audience. And so with 3-2-1 improv, and for me personally, we pull that back so much that it's really a guardrail, right? We set this guardrail where if you bump into the guardrail even accidentally, because you're doing improv, you don't, like, sometimes something pops out. Like if something pops out and you hit that guardrail, I'll feel guilty about that. But honestly, it's just me, like I didn't really offend anybody else. It's just me, but it's enough to be like, oh, hey, you know what? Don't want to do that again. And I'm it's so innocent in the broad scheme of things. But if it's against a guardrail in my life, then I'm like, all right, I learned from that. And it's like, all right, let's not do that again. And so I found really that what you don't think about and what you don't say in your day-to-day life, you won't think about and say on stage. And so it's a matter of personally being like, I'm not going to say these words that I wouldn't want my daughter, my 9-year-old, to repeat, around the house or driving in the car, or as I go about my life. I'm not going to say those things that I wouldn't want my 9-year-old to repeat. So if that's true in my day-to-day life, then it's really not going to come out on stage when I wouldn't want a 9-year-old or her parents, in this audience to feel uncomfortable. So it's a matter of setting up personal guardrails and sticking with that, and if you bump up against it, then you're not near the edge of the cliff. That's what the guardrail's for. So it's a good question. And I think it's also not a legalistic thing, because that's just for me, right? So for someone else, like, I'm not gonna say that they're wrong for not having the same guardrails I have, or for saying words I wouldn't, or something like that. That's when it gets legalistic, like, oh, you shouldn't do that. It's just a personal thing. So and just with the understanding, the grace that people have different guardrails, and that's where I've decided, and that's what I feel God is happy with in my own life. So that's a good question.
Yeah, and it's really, for somebody that's running my own team, it's really very refreshing to think like, hey, I'm actually kind of on the right track too, because we don't do biblical humor. There may be biblical situations that come up where we kind of not making fun of the Bible, but we find the funny within the stories of the Bible.
Absolutely.
Like when Peter is 1 minute being told, hey, you're the rock on which I'm going to build this church. And a few verses later, get behind me, Satan. It's like, like you said, the people of the Bible, just like us, are extremely flawed.
Oh,
and
yeah.
to point out the humanity that makes us the same is where the funny is found, not making fun of the Bible. But we don't intentionally set out and say, we're a Christian improv team, but we're not doing biblical stories and humor, because we don't want to get on that roll. Because when you're doing improv, sometimes you get on a roll and then you forget to pump the brakes, and all of a sudden, you're doing a comedy in a church and you realize, oh wow, there's crickets. And you don't ever want to do that, because outside of the comedy, the most important thing is protecting your ability to witness and to proclaim the name of Christ, which is more valuable. If nobody laughs, but they get a word or get a message regarding God and regarding Jesus, then it's a successful show.
I love it. Yeah, I always am a firm believer that stage time is hospitality. That's like a core value of mine, that every time I go on stage, I'm entrusted to help foster this environment for people to be able to relax, to be able to enjoy themselves, just like a host at a party, just like inviting someone into my home, even though it's not my stage, it's not my home, but I take on that role of, excuse me, of being hospitable and welcoming to those people so that they feel safe. And it's really a trust that these people offer you, right? When you're up there. And so when you handle that well, then, then they feel blessed by that. They can relax, they can enjoy themselves and laugh in ways that they've not laughed before.
Do your shows typically have a like a devotional element or a testimony element, or is you guys basically the setup and then a speaker comes along and they give the message? How do your shows normally look?
Sometimes it's a little bit of each, depending on the event. We'll almost always toward the end of a show, like before our last game of the night, we'll share a little bit about what 3-2-1 improv means, and which is 3 Christ-loving guys who combine into one ministry, all to bring glory to the one who makes it all possible. So that's what we remind people every night when we do a show, and then we'll talk about the difference between happiness and joy, how happiness is like maybe what you experience here at a show. You laugh, you have a good time, but it's temporary. You go back home and those things that were stressing you out, things that you're depressed to be around, those things that bring you anxiety or fear are still going to be there. And so happiness is great, but it's temporary, right? And so joy is what helps you kind of keep steady through those things. Doesn't make them go away. It doesn't necessarily make them feel less sad or scary, but we have the joy knowing that Jesus is there with us and loves us and cares for us, and there's hope on the other side. And that only comes from Jesus, of course, God who made us. So that's our message that we share at the end of every show. But like you said, like sometimes it's a matter of queuing up a speaker. Maybe we don't get to do a full hour and a half show. Maybe it's just, 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. And then a speaker comes. And we found that to be such a great ministry to be able to kind of serve as wall breakers. People come in to a church or an event with walls up. Maybe they're Christians and they just have, they're just dealing with stuff. They don't have to be just Christians, anybody, but just dealing with these mental barriers, and they wouldn't necessarily be ready to take on what a speaker might want to share with them or what God's telling them through the message later. Maybe they're a non-Christian who's like, they were invited to this comedy night at a church, and like, all right, well, I don't go to church, but I like comedy. I'll go with you. And they show up, but they're, kind of like ready. All right. Kind of on guard. And the power of comedy, the power of laughter is just to break down those walls that people come in with. Right. And so we've seen time and time again, God using the show just to get people laughing, put a crack in the wall here. And by the end, they just softened up. And so when someone comes in to deliver the word of God, we don't have to, preach the word all the time. If we just create a kind of softer soil, pound on the soil a little bit, and let God come in afterwards through someone else speaking, then we've done our job, and that's a blessing as well.
So we've been talking for about 30 minutes, but we haven't even talked about the book.
Man, time's flying. Here we go.
So you kind of talked about how God kind of threw your life off script to even get you into 3-2-1 Improv.
Yeah.
So tell us about the genesis of the book and what the book is about.
Yeah, awesome. So the book came out last summer, right? So I was 8 or 9 years into doing improv, and it was really just a matter of slowly realizing and thinking back and realizing that, okay, what has helped me succeed in improv is actually helping me succeed in dealing with the unexpected in life. And the skills that improv develop, that it's it's applicable to dealing with the interruptions, dealing with the unexpected, dealing with when life throws you a curveball, and not just being able to be more adaptable, but as a Christian realizing, oh, this is actually bringing me closer to Jesus. Like, this is actually forcing me to lean on him a little bit and see him work through these things. And so, yeah, I was at a point where it's like, it became a moral imperative to me to write the book. That's when I knew it was like, oh man, I have to do this. When it went from, oh, it'd be fun, I could write a book about that, that'd be fun to write a book, to I have to write this book. Like, I have to share this with people, because there's people who I was around and continue to see who are just like so thrown off by life, and especially the past year and a half, that as we're talking now. Little did I know, as I was writing the book, what was coming to the entire world. Just seeing people like, oh man, people are getting so frustrated, getting so angry, getting so lost and confused because their plans didn't work out, because something happened, and whether it was an illness or someone passing away, there some pretty big and heavy things, and people were just mad at God and so thrown off, and they couldn't, they're losing weeks of work, they're losing money, they're losing their sanity, they haven't laughed in months. And I was like, oh man, I have medicine for this. I have a solution. And God just made it super clear. It's like, okay, if you've got medicine for the pain that these people are experiencing, then you got to share it. And so I got to work, and it took like a year and a half to get the book ready, which, and a lot of those months were even just not working on it, because writing a book's its own personal battle, and you're wrestling with your own doubts and insecurities, and what are people going to think? Is this going to be helpful? Is this going to be stupid? So that was its own growth journey. But it really got to the point, it's like, all right, it's these principles here that I believe can help people. And it's not about helping people become improvisers and be able to perform on stage. That's not the point. It's about being able to recognize interruptions as opportunities. And that, like I mentioned earlier, the ability to accept, we say in improv, yes, and, right? You say, that's the mantra. And so we say, yes, and if you can go into life, if you can go into a situation saying, yes, I accept God, what you're doing here. I accept the fact that my reality is different than what I expected, but I accept the fact that what you're offering is good. And I add value, and I offer something of value to the people that you've put in my path, to you, God, and I offer my time and my energy and my words to you, then that's a real good start. In fact, even before that, though, more important than even saying yes and is first listening, right? First off the bat, if I'm teaching someone improv, if I'm training a group in how to do improv, it's not about saying anything. It's about first listening, so you know how to respond. If you are listening, you know what to respond with. If you're not listening, you're just responding to something. Right. I'm sorry. I reverse that. If you know what you're listening to, then you can respond to that. Otherwise, you just respond with whatever you had in mind, whatever you wanted to say. And that's the first step in really improving relationships and listening for God's work and his word and things. And so that's the heart of the book, man. It's just, it breaks it up into three chunks, right? The first chunk is having to recognize that your life is thrown off script. And so you have a new reality. And there's an amazing quote, if I can read that, from C.S. Lewis. And when I read this, it was like, this is it. This is like what the book's about. From C.S. Lewis, of course, wrote Chronicles of Narnia, Screwtape Letters, great theologian, super, super intelligent guy. But he breaks it down. He says, the great thing, if one can, is to stop regarding all the unpleasant things as interruptions of one's own or one's real life. The truth is, of course, that what one calls interruptions are precisely one's real life, the life God is sending one day by day. What one calls one's real life is a phantom of one's imagination. So he's saying, like, if you feel like, I just want to get back to the way things were, I just want to get back to my real life. Like, no, this interruption, this is your real life. And so how you treat your interruptions is how you treat your life, because they're the same thing. And as I dug into more in the Bible, I recognized, oh man, Jesus was interrupted constantly. He's a master improviser. He was never thrown off once. Not because he's the Son of God, which of course he was, but because he recognized interruptions as opportunities. It says like he was just having a bad day, right? So Jesus, his cousin John the Baptist was beheaded. He was murdered. He was tired from teaching and preaching all day. He was just out on the lake with his friends, trying to get away from the celebrity status for a little bit. And he comes back. He comes back to the shore, and there's a whole crowd there waiting for him. Right? He's like, oh man. Like if it was me, I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so tired. Can they just leave me alone? Just go home. I just need a minute, right? But the Bible says, like, no, Jesus saw them and he viewed them as sheep without a shepherd. And he had compassion on them. And instead of feeling interrupted and thrown off by them interrupting his day, he recognized it as an opportunity to love and to shepherd. So yeah, the book starts off with this premise of taking a look at Jesus's life and recognizing that he's a master improviser by recognizing that interruptions are actually opportunities. And then the rest of the book goes through the basics of improv, what makes it work, basics like Improv 101, and how that translates to how we can recognize, to listen, to accept, yes, and add value. And then from there, a couple more advanced principles of improv that make a scene particularly exciting, but also help you be more effective in your improvised life. So that's what the book's about. And it's been a blessing to me. I know I have to practice what I preach quite a bit. Of course, It came out during the pandemic. So already it's like, all right, thrown off. This is not what I planned. I guess I have to go read a couple chapters myself and get back into it.
I mean, what perfect timing. Our entire society, the entire world was thrown off script during that entire year. So it's almost like God knows what he's doing and providentially.
Almost like it.
Yeah. And I would say that God is the ultimate improviser. He walked onto a blank stage and spoke a world into existence, which is what we do on a much smaller scale. Is we go out and the stage could be a cruise ship. It could be Denny's bathroom. It could be the penthouse of the Ritz-Carlton. We just speak it into existence.
Just infinitely creative. Whatever you say, you speak it, and there it is. And everyone says, yes, and yep, exactly. Whatever you say is true. I wish that could be the case in real life. just speak something and have it be true. But it is the world we get to play in improv. That's a lot of fun.
Although I do think it would be dangerous to play zip zap zop with God. I think he's got a little bit powerful.
Yes, that first zap, I think it's a one-way trip.
Well, Mike, we definitely want people to check out the book. It's available on Amazon. You also find it at thronoffscript.com. This is what the cover looks like. Be sure to pick up a copy and learn a little bit better how to adjust when your life is thrown off script. You've talked about the interruptions and so many. My wife and I don't have kids yet. We were praying for it, working on it. But so many parents I know consider their children walking in on something as an interruption. And like you talked about Jesus, that weariness, but still recognizing their need for the shepherd. I think that parents can learn from your book as well about the importance of those opportunities to show that love, to show that this child is important, because nothing that you're doing necessarily is more important than that kid that comes in the room, unless you're disarming a bomb and you just want them to go away while you cut the blue wire.
Give me a minute.
But that's very, very rare, if ever.
I know. I've only diffused like 2 or 3 bombs in my kid's 9 years. So yeah, it doesn't happen very often. Yeah, for sure.
But it's a good skill to have.
It's important to develop that because you never know. That's good.
Right.
It's true.
So, Mike, I want to transition and talk about your testimony, your story of how you came to know Jesus. Was it a story where you grew up in a Christian home and were influenced by your parents, or was your journey more of you finding it on your own?
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. I actually, before I get into that story, I'm going to take a sip of water, and it's going to be a distractingly large water bottle. This is what I keep near me this whole time. Oh, there you go. Uh, it could survive like a nuclear bomb. It almost is a nuclear bomb. All right, I can't get away with that without distracting people, so I just got to mention that. But yes, so to talk about, man, where I came from, I am super blessed to come from a multi-generational Christian family, and I know not everybody has that experience, and I recognize what a blessing that is. My my parents, my grandparents, my great grandparents, and beyond, who I never even met. Solid Christian families, and that example, we really got to see the generational blessing. You know, my great grandmother, I got to know her for 30 years of my life. My great grandmother, and she was an amazing woman of God who just was super thankful. I actually talk about her in the book, and her example of gratitude, and how important gratitude is to remind you of what's true, and gratitude being worship, reminding you of what God has done, and grounding yourself in that truth. So yeah, she just prayed for her family all the time, and we're still feeling the effects of that. And so that's encouraging, like for people who maybe don't have that, uh, legacy of Christians, but want to start that now in gratitude and in prayer, praying for your next generations, praying for your extended family, and see God start to extend that blessing from generation to generation. I think, I've been grateful to be able to experience that. So yeah, so I gave my life to Jesus about as early as I could possibly understand what that meant. I was like 5 years old. I was in kindergarten, and of course, I think kids have such that faith of like jumping all in. It's like, all right, yeah, that's great. Jesus is real. So that's what I want to do. And obviously didn't understand everything, but God didn't need me to, and God took that little seed of little childlike faith there, and and stuck with me, and so it's been a life of honestly, as a teenager, it got a little bit tough, not because of necessarily any behavior or choices that I was making, but because I was seeing at that point there were some other kids who had some pretty rough life, and you'd go to youth group, and there would be stories of other teenagers, or maybe some people older, giving their testimonies of like, oh man, yeah, I was into all this hard stuff. I was making all these bad choices. I was ruining my life, and ended up in like the worst pit of my life, and God reached down and pulled me up out of that, and here I am today. And I'm like, man, I mean, the worst thing I did was like maybe had 2 gummy Flintstones vitamins. like that's I was like, that was the hardest drugs I ever did. And so I was like, well, I don't have these amazing stories of what God did in my life. And so it was like, well, what do I like? Is it genuine? Like, I almost felt left out. And God showed me over the years, and through kind of thinking about that, wrestling with that, you know what, God, it takes just as much grace to kind of preemptively save me or prevent me from those situations and those consequences as it does to save me out of them, and more so than that, honestly, any little sin that I did commit had just as bad consequences, right?
Sure.
Like, doesn't matter if you lie a little bit or really go and mess up your life and the lives of other people. That's still enough to separate you and require God the Jesus to bridge that gap with between you and God again. And so realizing that, it's just been a matter of like, all right, like I want to live worthy of that which he did, and so it's been an encouragement, to meet other people similar to that, and we'd be able to talk. It's like, look, man, like we've been, it's okay if we don't have this dramatic salvation story. Let's live in light of what God has done for us, because it's still great and it's still more than we deserve.
Yeah. And when I hear stories like that, I know that, like you said, that there's almost like this testimony envy that happens. Like, man, I wish I had that story. That story is so cool. But the story is the grace that God was still able to reach you, because it's very easy to get gospel calloused when you haven't been tried. You just feel like, hey, maybe I don't need God because everything's good now. And so just the fact that there was the grace there to still draw you to him despite maybe not having that. And like you said, there's enough there's an abundance of grace to save you from those trials as it is to save you through those trials.
Mm-hmm.
So every testimony is so valuable, and I just love hearing that God was still at work in your life, even though and it shows the value of being a parent that prays and a parent that pours in to the next generation, and that models what it is like to follow Christ. Because parents think, well, as long as I send them to church, it's up to the church. They can do that, and then we'll be Christian on the holidays. But it takes living it out day to day, because as a kid, you saw it more than you heard it. And no matter what they said, if they didn't follow it up with action, it wouldn't have stuck. So, so your testimony speaks just as much to parents about their importance in the next generation, in their children and their children's children. Because you said you got to see your great grandmother, and she poured into you, and she modeled that behavior. So it's true that how important the previous generations are to the next generations. And I love that your story exemplifies that.
Yeah, you can be a cycle breaker. There's a family of just a cycle of some sort of addiction or whatever the case may be, and you could be a cycle breaker. You could break that, and furthermore, start a new story. Start a new legacy, and it starts with just giving that to Jesus, right, and leaning on him. And I mean, like, to kind of go back to the improv thing, like you can speak that, you can declare that and have that be true, and lean in to what God's doing, and then just see the blessing come from there. And it doesn't mean everything's going to be easy and everything's going to be good and fun all the time, but God's blessing, he draws people closer to himself. That's what he does.
And I love improv in that if you're in a bad scene, if the scene is not going well, if you make a bold choice and a bold move, almost repenting in the scene, you could save the scene. So if your life is going that way, like a scene, and you make that bold move to repent and turn, that bold choice can save the scene that's your life. So that's just another thing that I love about improv, comparing it to our walk with God.
Absolutely. That reminds me of two things. First of all, I think whenever you feel like I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do in a scene, I always coach people, just say what's true. Just do what's true. What would be true? If this is true, your context, whatever's going on right now, if this is true, then what else would be true? Mm-hmm. All right. And if you can answer that, what else would be true in this, then just say that and do that. And because truth is actually what's in improv, what's funny, right? It is the audience seeing like, oh yeah, they would do that, or oh, they would say that. Why is that funny to them? Because that's what would be true. And I love that you started with the devotions with Dave earlier at the top of this segment, talking about the passage about the armor of God, the belt of truth.
Yes,
is so interesting that Paul says that, because Paul's chained to a guard, right? Like he's writing this letter to the church in Ephesus, and he's in like house arrest. So he's like chained up, I don't know, by the foot, whatever, to this Roman guard. And he's looking at him, and he's just like, what else is he going to do? He's chained to him. He's just studying this armor, and he's realizing, hey, you know what? This armor is like, it's kind of like different aspects of righteousness. Like, it's different aspects of God-like and godliness, and the belt. He's like, and the belt holds everything together. It supports the whole armor. It really provides the place where the sword can hang, and it just cinches everything tight. Like truth, the belt of truth, and so truth is so grounding in that it guards you, it guides you, and what a great way to not only just get out of a tough improv scene, but also help to get you out of a tough spot in life. It's like, okay, what's true right now? What's true? God loves me. That's true. And go from there. If this is true, then what else is true? If God loves me, then I don't need to fear. All right. If I don't need to fear, then what? Then I can take action. If I can take action, then what? Then I just got to do it boldly. And then you're all, before you know it, you're out.
Yeah.
And it requires that the second thing that you were saying reminded me of is going all in, right? Because you said just like making a bold choice and going with that, a bold choice based in truth, and a bold choice going all in. Like if man, I'll tell you, like, I'm not the best improviser. Like I'm not always great on my feet, and I'll stumble over words. But I've learned that, you know what covers all of that is going all in 100%, 110%. And, so when I see someone struggling with improv and struggling, feeling effective on stage, it's often because they're not going all in. They're reserving, right. They're filtering, they're kind of holding back, thinking that they're protecting themselves, thinking like, well, if I do that, then I'm going to look ridiculous. Like, people are going to, think I'm weird. People aren't going to laugh. I'm not going to do that. So they kind of hold back. Mm-hmm. And it hurts them. It hurts the scene, and it ends up not being enjoyable for anyone. And so the same thing in life is if you're a Christian and you're struggling, feeling effective, if you're feeling like, I don't know, I just kind of going through tough spots. I don't really feel like God is with me. And I don't really feel like I'm kind of struggling in my prayer life. I'm kind of struggling, feeling effective as a Christian. Then it's not because you're not doing the right things. It's because you're not going all in. Yeah. And it's what's separating you from an abundant, bold life with God, because you're protecting yourself. You're like, well, I mean, I've been hurt in this area, so I don't really want to give God that. Or I don't know, those church people hurt me. I don't think I want to go back to church. And if you're not going all in, then you're just missing out on the abundance of blessings that God offers people who just go all in life. So making a bold choice and sticking with it to get out of not just a sticky improv situation, but also a sticky situation in life that's a good takeaway, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those watching, going to pop up the cover of the book one more time, Thrown Off Script. Be sure to check it out. You can find it at MikeDomeny.com, or just search Thrown Off Script on Amazon. Buy the book. It is available on Kindle as well if you prefer the digital and want to save a couple trees.
But you can also get the audiobook. The audiobook is a different experience, man. It's like having me whisper in your ear, and not always in a creepy way. But the book is so conversational. I love the opportunity to. It's just a different experience, right? It's like a conversation, and I think that's a lot of fun as well. There's also on the website you mentioned, MikeDomeny.com or ThrownOffScript.com. There's actually at the top of that page there a little take the quiz about who you are or how you react to the unexpected. You can take the free quiz. It's a fun, silly quiz, but it does give you some real results. And then you're able to download this PDF with some content that's not in the book, but some little mini improv takeaways to help you based on what your personality type is. There's people who are analyzers when the unexpected hits. There's agonizers, there's arguers, and there's avoiders. I think you're one of the four types. And so then there's some content for you after taking that, figure out what you are, some content to help you just have a couple takeaways to help make your week go by a little smoother. So that's a lot of fun too.
Awesome. So I actually neglected to warn you before we went live. There are two final segments to the show. I don't know if you saw them in the invite, but there's the interrogation, 7 quick questions that otherwise wouldn't have fit in the interview. Wise counsel for anyone that wants to use their gifts for God's glory. What would your wise counsel be?
Great.
But before we get to that, here is the interrogation. So, improv thing. 5 things. Name 5 improv games or exercises you love.
Excellent. I love the game. Oh, 5. Okay. I love the game Helping Hands, where things just get messy. I get to be the hands in my group every time, and it's so much power, and I get to avoid being so messy. I love that. I love the exercise, the warm-up game of Yes, Let's, where someone recommends something, an activity, and then everyone says, yes, let's, and we just do it. Fantastic opportunity to get that rhythm, get that habit of agreeing. I love the game Party Quirks. It's classic. Any improviser in the country knows how to play Party Quirks. You can jump in with anyone and say, hey, let's play Party Quirks. And everyone can do it. And that's a lot of fun. And it's so different every time. I love the game. Okay, this is funny. I don't play this with 3-2-1 Improv, but with other groups I've played. Zoom in, zoom out. It's a very obscure game, but it goes between 2 people, kind of like we are here, and we do a scene like normal. Someone says zoom out, and then you play with your little finger puppet, and you become your little finger puppet, and so you have 2 talking like this, and then all right, zoom in, and then you're back to the people again, and it allows you to do some crazy falling from the sky. It's silly. It's ridiculous. You should not play it very often because it's so niche, but it's so silly and makes me giggle thinking about it. What can I say? And that's 4. The 5 improv games and exercises. The last one is backward forward. It's probably the hardest game for me anyway. Where you play a scene forward and then you play it backward and maybe forward and backward and forward and backward again, saying the lines in reverse order. It really keeps you sharp, really makes you stay on your toes. But that's a lot of fun. I really enjoy that one. We kick that one off with 3-2-1 shows. That kicks off the whole show. So it's either going to be a success or a right off the top.
Yeah. Who was your hero as a kid?
My hero as a kid? Is it too kitschy to say my dad? I feel like my dad. No, I'm going to say my dad because he always exemplified coming home and being present with me. He didn't work overtime. He came home. He was present. We played. We roughhoused, and he's learned more about himself and continues to grow himself. And we would go out during rainstorms and unclog sewers from the leaves and stuff, and just learning the value of servitude. Great example for me. Still is my hero.
Good. Question number 3. Other than the Bible and thrown off script, what's a book that has impacted your life?
Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. I'm a big C.S. Lewis fan. Mere Christianity is such a logical step-by-step progression of coming to realize that Christianity, as explained by the Bible, has to be real, and it's a great response to people who want the logic. All right, talk to me about why do you believe the Bible is true? Or why do you believe Jesus existed? And he does an amazing job of just laying out the logical progression of how we can be sure in our faith. It's not always about talking to other people about faith. Sometimes it's just for you to be like, yeah, what I believe can be logically sound as well.
Mm-hmm. And question number 4, either as a do-over or to experience something good again. If you could, what's something that you wish you could go back and do again?
Oh, that's... You know what? Let's see. Those first 2 years I mentioned of marriage, we had a job. My wife and I. A little extra detail I didn't mention earlier. We did motivational assemblies for high schools and junior highs around the country. We basically lived in a van. We had our equipment for the shows in the back. We had our personal suitcases in the middle, and we just drove around the country. We'd be in a cheap hotel every night. We'd live out of our van. And so it's our first 2 years of marriage, right? So if we had an argument or a conflict, we were like next to each other. We were always within 6 feet of each other, or in a tiny hotel room. So we can deal with conflict like that now. And so it was such a great foundation for our marriage, and 2 best years of my life for sure. So I'd totally go do that again, just to be able to hit the road with her. And that was a lot of fun.
Nice. So the next question is, what story or passage in the Bible most impacts you?
You know what? I love the obscure passages in the Bible that don't get preached very often. There's just something about. I'm also going to see it because I noted it's so obscure. I don't really remember all the passage exactly, but I've got it written down somewhere. Um, but I love the obscure passages in like the Old Testament. They don't get talked about very much, but they've got a great nugget. And I don't have the reference written down. Okay, we'll give bonus points for someone who can look it up later. I think it might be in Second Kings, but there's this story of David, and he and his son Absalom. His son Absalom's going crazy, trying to take over the kingdom. He's banished, right? David banishes him and doesn't want to see him anymore. And so David's right hand man Joab is like, "This isn't good. Like, you need to reconcile with your son." But David doesn't want to hear anything of it. And so Joab gets a hold of this widow, this woman who is basically an actor. And that's what I love. As an actor, I love this story because we see an actor really, kicking some butt here in the Bible. And he tells her scene. Basically, it's like improv. He's like, "All right, here's your character. Here's your scene." She goes up to David and says, tells the story of like, "Oh, I'm a widow, and my son has been banished, and but I really want him back, but I'm scared to because I'm afraid he's going to get killed, and so what do you think I should do?" And so David says, "Oh, well, you definitely need to reconcile with him, and if anyone hurts him, let him know, and I'll let me know, and I'll make sure that you get reconciled, and he's protected and kept safe." And then she says, then he's like, "Wait a minute. Did Joab set you up for this?" And she's like, "Yeah, you're very wise, King." And so then he was able to reconcile with Absalom. I just love the story of God using an actor to really reach the king's heart like that and play a role and play a character. It's a lot of fun.
Nice. Number 6, who is someone that you've met that has blown you away? Whether it's like somebody you didn't think you would ever get to meet, or somebody that surprised you with how the meeting went.
Well, that's interesting. Someone you've met that blew you away. The first, I think, let's see. This is a really interesting question. Fun short story of little celebrity sighting, which first comes to mind. I met Felicia Rashad, who played Mrs. Cosby back in the day.
Yeah.
Mrs. Huxtable, technically. And I met her on a plane, and she was incredibly gracious and elegant and just wonderfully. I guess it just blew me away. I was just like, oh, she is a very kind and elegant person, and very humble. And I enjoyed that experience. It was really interesting. But I think more important, honestly, more blown away are a young man at a conference that I witnessed that he had disabilities and very difficult to understand verbally by the way he talked, but was at an open mic session and had like a Q&A sort of after the talk. And in that session, he just asked, it kind of reminded me of when Jesus was teaching and friends lowered their friend who was paralyzed, disabled, into the middle of the room, and just all the attention went to him. And it kind of reminded me of that. And he just reached out and said, "Hey, what can someone like me do? Like, how can someone who struggles like I do fit in with what you're doing here?" And it was just a great case of like the whole conference just got thrown off, right? Because this interruption, this guy, and no one expected that, but people ended up, there was someone in the room who's like, "Actually, my job is to help people like you succeed, and let's connect." And people ended up donating money so he could get these programs, and it was just an amazing time of like, oh man, that blows me away, just the bravery, and I think I think that's more important than a celebrity sighting to me. There's like, oh, that and kind of shock and awe there. More important is just the people who are just being brave, right? And being an inspiration. I think I love that. That's what comes to mind.
Nice. I like that. All right, final question, the interrogation. What's a venue at which you'd most like to perform, either as a speaker or with 321, or maybe a combination?
A venue at which you'd most like to perform. I mean, I'd love to perform at one of the old historical theaters, you know, in it's in New York City or something like that. Just one of the old, like, revered theaters. One where if I was doing improv in it, the original designers would be like, "Oh no, this is a disgrace." But just one of those, like, it's way above me, way too fancy for me. But I would love to be there.
Nice. All right, so Mike, the final question I always ask to end each interview is, for anyone that wants to step up, use their gifts, their talents, their passions for God's glory, what's your wise counsel for them?
I'll share what I'm working on currently, and I've not mastered this. I'm not saying this as the guru on top of the mountain. I'm saying this as someone who's walking up the mountain along with you, because I don't have it all figured out, but I got to keep reminding myself. And that is that clarity comes through action. We all want clarity. We all want clarity of, like, all right, what do I do with my gifts? Where do I go? What does God want me to do? I just need clarity. God, please give me clarity. And of course, please pray those prayers. But I don't think God zaps you with clarity. I don't think God zaps you with a clear plan of where to go. I believe clarity, and I say I believe it because I have to just choose to believe it, even though I don't always see it. Clarity comes through action is what God's been teaching me, that you can think about it and, you know, have ideas and talk about it with people, ask people for advice, all good things. But the best clarity comes through when you just take an action. It's like, almost, if you're looking at fog, you can't plan and plot your way through just by standing on the outside looking at, oh, all right, we'll go this way and this way and this way. Or in a maze, you know, unless you're not above it, you're like at it at the entrance. You can't, like, all right, we'll go this way and this way and this way. The clarity comes when you step into it, when you step into the fog and, like, okay, I can go this way now. And I couldn't see that earlier, but I can see it now. And so that's what I'm learning, man. That's what I'm going through and wrestling with right now in terms of what to do, where to go with this. I got to stop being in my head and start taking an action, imperfect action, and seeing what clarity comes through that.
Yeah, that's a good word. I like that idea of, you can't plan your route through the fog. You've got to go through it, and then it begins getting clearer as you go through and further in. So I like that imagery. That's awesome. Good word.
Yeah, man, it's something I'm trying to get better at, and trusting God will kind of make it clear as we go.
Yeah. Well, connect with our guest, Mike Domeny, at mikedomeny.com, appropriately named, or on Facebook at Mike Domeny Improv. Mike, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Wish you the best with the book, with 321 Improv, and who knows, maybe someday Well-Versed and 321 can do a joint show. I don't know, maybe.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So, Mike, thank you so much. And we'll be back on Monday next week with Dorsey Ross, our guest for the Gifts for Glory podcast. So we will see you next week. Have a great rest of your week, and thank you so much for watching or listening wherever you are. We'll talk to you soon.